Hello, everyone, and welcome to our free week of lessons in software quality assurance testing. Today is day one, and I'm very excited to have all of you here to start this learning process together. So let's get started, grab a notebook, and be ready to learn. All right, so our 5 days agenda today will be dedicated for testing basics. You will be introduced to the world of testing, what is testing in general, and specifically what is software testing. We'll see some real life examples, and we'll also create our first test case. We'll see what the requirement documents are and why they're so important in testing. And tomorrow will be dedicated for defects. And the next day will be SQL. There's a specific language, structured query language that is used to query databases, working with data. If you like working with data sheets or spreadsheets, so SQL is something that you're gonna love. And ETL is a specialization within this field, the testing field, and we'll talk about that as well. So day 4, Python, we'll create our first Python script. So that's going to be fun. We'll talk about the recent developments in artificial intelligence, by the way. That's going to be interesting as we create Python scripts and as we try to debug our script and involve artificial intelligence in that as well. So day 5 will be dedicated for test automation. All right. Today's audience, majority that we have today are new to QA field or learning QA, but we also have junior QAs attendees who are looking for jobs. And for those who are looking for a job and who are in the job market, we wish the best of luck, and we really hope that these 5 lessons are going to help you in some way contribute to your success, and you will get that long awaited job offers very soon, hopefully within weeks. We also have senior professionals. So regardless of whether you're a beginner or a senior professional or looking for a job, hopefully these lessons are going to be beneficial for you. This slide, next slide, is going to be dedicated for those who are looking for motivation, and it's really important part of our journey as we look up to something, right? So here's one question that I want to ask from the audience. You can put it in the chat box. What motivates you to pursue a career in IT? And as I told you, I have changed my career at some point from business to IT. And especially now, I can see lots of interest in IT. So if you could go ahead and put your answers in the chat box. So what motivates you to pursue a career in IT? Why would you like to be an IT professional? All right, so I see some really good answers, new opportunities, and I like coding. I need a new career and better pay. Absolutely. Financial motivation is a big one. And you also want to grow, and you want freedom. That's a very interesting one, by the way, right? So freedom, so that is financial freedom, but at the same time, you want more time to spend with your family, right? So that's a new skill set. Working from home, by the way, has become a very one of the top, I would say, motivators for those who are trying to switch to IT career these days. And it is feasible, by the way. So let's thank you for your contribution, and let's just see some of the career benefits of being in IT. So the first one being, or the top one being, working from home these days, especially post-pandemic period. The pandemic actually showed to the whole world that you can work from home and you can still perform the same tasks as an IT technician. And it has been working out for many companies. And companies are actually changing their infrastructure in a way, investing millions of dollars to enable the employees to continue working remotely, or at least in a hybrid mode, right? With a couple of days at work and a couple of days at home, and that has become a new normal these days. And I personally have been remote since 2020, and all of the graduates that we have, the recent graduates, they have been going either remotely or hybrid, job offers and opportunities. And we all know why working from home is so important, because you're definitely saving time during your commute, right? And at that time can be spent on other stuff, like you could do sports, or you could spend time with your family. So it's a really good life and work balance there. So another good benefit, and I saw this from your answers as well, that is career growth, right? IT. So we will be talking about mostly testing today, but testing is, think of it as like a door into the IT world, and it would be probably the easier way of getting into IT. I would never say it's the easiest. It is difficult. It requires lots of determination and effort. We'll talk about that as well, but it's easier in comparison to other careers, such as becoming an engineer or developer right away. And you have an opportunity to grow in IT and make a career. It can go all the way up to a vice president or further. That really depends on what you really want. Do you like managing? Do you like working with people? And that really requires lots of self improvement, getting certifications, and then working on yourself and being proactive and so on. So let's see some of the other benefits. That is paid vacation. And as a consultant, when you just go out there in the job market, it's not so easy to get a full-time job with all the benefits right away. Most likely you will end up as a consultant, but this is also the possibility out there, and you can eventually get converted from a consultant to full-time and then have paid benefits, paid holidays and as well. And of course, we can't miss the health insurance and the 401k retirement benefits, right? Those are the top benefits that I could think of, and I think most of you here can certainly relate. Now, we talk about benefits, and there's a very important question to ask here: is it easy? Is it easy to pursue this career? And I always say this to the students: it's important to have correct expectations right from the beginning, so that you are prepared. Now, think of any big achievement in your life that you have pursued after, and then you have achieved. Let it be in education, or at work, or in your family, or in sports, or any achievement that you have obtained, that you went after, and then you achieved. Basically, was it easy? I'm sure it wasn't. You had to have this dream or vision, right? You had to visualize what you really wanted to gain, and then you had to list up specific goals, and you worked hard for a period of time towards that particular goal. And Well, guess what? The same formula, the same steps works whenever you're trying to change a career as well. But however, there are additional factors here that is consistency. So if you're committed to changing your career, you're taking a class, you have to be consistent in your learning process. And that has to be regular, right? So you have your goal and you're consistently moving along until you get that job offer, right? And you will get it. And you also need to sacrifice. And when we say sacrifice, we mean the time, right? So the time spent for the social network. Your time is limited. It's just 24 hours a day, and then you have so much stuff to do. And most of the people I know who change their careers, they have their families, they have another job on the side, and then they're at the same time they're studying. And you have very limited time while you're doing this. And remember, you have to get your time back from all those social network, or watching movies, or you probably might have to cancel your subscription to Netflix, unless you're using Netflix for learning English, for example, right? So most of the people I know who changed careers are they have the English as their second language, so that's also understandable. And it's English is a very important factor, as we are mostly talking about North America here. So remember one thing: you're going out there and trying to compete with the people, with the other candidates who have completed bachelor's degree in IT, right? And also the professionals who just trying to switch careers or switch roles, or they just lost their job and they're trying to look for another job, and you're in the same market with them. So that means if you ask me if it's easy, the answer is no. It is as difficult as you would achieve any other goal in your life, right? So you have to set the goal, you have to study hard, follow the instructions as if you have a mentor, and then you have to work consistently towards your goal until you get those interviews and then the job offer. All right. Now, let's also talk about the recent layoffs, right? So, I always try to be honest with the students, that anything that's happening in the market, that has to be discussed. And what's happening in the market recently, you probably know that the big tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Meta, and most of them were actually letting people go, right? So what was actually happening, if you look closer, is that you will have to go back a little bit in period when the pandemic started, right? When the pandemic started in 2020, everybody went digital, right? People started working remotely, and then there was so much need for the technology, right? Zoom was being, it was being used so much more than it was, before. All the, video conferencing tools are being used more, and people are buying more laptops, and so on, right? And accordingly, the big tech companies, they went to hiring spree. So what does that mean? Hiring spree. So they started hiring a lot more than they actually needed. So currently, basically, the market is balancing itself. They're just letting people go that they hired too much before, during pandemic. But if you look at the analysis here, right here by this article in CNBC, it says that yes, they're laying off thousands of people, but they're laying off non-technical people, mid-level managers who were earning, who have been in the company for many years and have been earning the big bucks, basically. But the technical people and the tech jobs are still hot in 2023. Okay, so I I know the graduates who went out to market in December, but in January they got 2 job offers, and they, recently they started working. So if you're out there and looking for a job, I would say, have your belief as it was, and you will get that job offer real quick. So another frequently asked question, is certificate required? So to become a tester, do you need a certification? So let's look at some of the job positions out there in the market. And as you can see, one of them is for senior QA automation. The other one is for a QA analyst. They are mentioning ISTQB certificate, but they specifically say it's preferred. So the answer is, it's desirable. It helps you to stand out. If you have time, and even if you're already a working professional, I recommend that you go ahead and spend that time and then get certified. That there's, it doesn't cost a lot. Maybe it costs like $200 or $300, that certification, but that's going to help you to grow in your career, first of all. But if you're in a job market, having a certificate on your resume helps you to stand out. That shows that you are someone who's working on themselves, who are proactive, who cares about their career, right? Rather than just having certain work history, right? So I personally have certificates from ISTQB and ICAgile, and I also have certification from the Scrum Alliance as a certified Scrum Master. Now, those certificates, I wouldn't say it's easy to get. You have to pass the exam, and then you will be certified. And then to pass the exam, you're also studying, you're learning the subject, right? So I would say it is up to you, basically. It's desirable. You want to stand out, you want to exceed, you want to be better than the crowd. So go ahead and work on your certification. So if you need any advice on which certificates would be, you want to start from, let me know. I would say the ISTQB would be the first one if you are going with the testing. So now we talked about the benefits. We talked about the the current market, the certification, and all of that. Now let's talk about testing. So what is testing, and how do you test? Now, testing is checking how well the product works, right? It's that simple. Now, I'm sure most of you have done testing in your life, knowing and not knowing that you were testing. Think about the return period that you have when you purchase from Amazon, right? So what is this return period for? That return period is for you to get the product and then check if it actually meets your expectations. Where do you get your expectations from? You get the expectations from the product descriptions, right? The advertisement, and how they try to sell you, and whether you saw the advertisement on the Amazon or somewhere else. So you have this expectation, and then you have this reality when you're using the product. And that's when you make a decision, okay, this actually is as expected or not as expected, right? And if you like it, then you keep it. If you don't like it, you return it. So, or think of, when you're purchasing a car, you go for a test drive. So you've done testing. Same thing as when you're purchasing a home, you do home inspection right before the closing, right? Again, you're checking the roof, you're checking the plumbing and everything. You're making sure that everything is as expected as it was described, and so on. So let's have another definition here. So you test by comparing your expectations versus reality. So you have your expectations and you have the reality, right? Let's look at this particular example here. This couple here testing the mattress, and they're testing the mattress. It's an interesting type of mattress, or the material used here is very interesting. That it's called actually is a temper, and the material was originally created or invented by NASA to protect the astronauts during space travel, because the temper material provides a reduced motion transfer. And that material was adopted there or used by mattress manufacturers, and this couple saw the commercial that where you can put a glass of wine at one edge or one end of the mattress, on the other end you can jump and this glass of wine should not spill. So that's the expectation that they have, and then they're checking the reality. Right, here's a question to the audience: how would you test? How would you test? Right, and imagine you're working as a tester for this manufacturer, and how would you be testing this mattress? As you can see, this gentleman here trying to hammer the mattress and checking if it spills. Okay, so I'm getting some really good answers. Interesting. Backflip, shake the bed. Here we go. Yes, you could backflip. Several people jump together, right? Several people. So this one is an interesting suggestion here, but then again, you see that when you say several people, that's a bit vague, right? You want to put 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, and you will eventually find this breaking point. That's a good type of testing as well, right? Finding that breaking point, how many people can actually jump, and have kids on it, so kids can jump. You can put several glasses of wine, right? And then what else you could do? Yeah, pretty much you could bounce a basketball on top of it. Yeah, some really good answers. So you got the idea, right? So let's see some more examples of testing. And how would you test a robot vacuum cleaner? Here's another question to you. So this is probably more advanced technology than what we just saw. So let's see one example here. Robot vacuum cleaner, and as you can see, one idea here would be to test if the vacuum cleaner would still go ahead and handle the bigger pieces, like maybe Lego pieces. How else you could test? You could test it against wires, because the wires are small, and you can it's hard to notice. So I'm getting some answers here. Put many obstacles around. Yes, you can put a bunch of obstacles around and then see how it handles. But then again, where do you get your expectations from, right? Where do you actually get your expectations from? That couple who were testing the mattress and the glass of wine, they were getting their expectations from the commercial, right? But here, these days, whenever you're testing, let's say a vacuum cleaner or a robot vacuum cleaner, your expectations come from the product description, right? Whenever you purchase the vacuum cleaner, they will send you this product description, this piece of document that you open and then you start studying. You go through and then you read, okay, can it actually handle the obstacles? In which directions it would actually go and move around the house. Can you set a map for the vacuum cleaner? And then how safe is it? How safe is it? That's another important factor. So you have pets, you might have kids. That's cool. At home, and then is it safe? So you need to test the safety features as well. All right. Ask for the requirements document. Here we go. Yeah, we're getting to the point. All depends on acceptance criteria. First, read the instructions of the vacuum. That's a really good point. That's exactly where we are heading towards. So now that we saw some real life examples of testing, now let's just move on or implement the same idea to software testing, right? I just want you to keep in mind that expectation and reality as you start to understand the software testing. So what is software testing? It is verifying or it is checking that the application does what it is supposed to do, or the software, right? Application or software, whether it does what it is supposed to do by comparing the expected conditions against the actual results and then reporting the differences as bugs. Right? Maybe a little bit wordy, but the idea is the same. Okay, when we say applications, right now we're using a Zoom application, for example, right? And then this video will be uploaded to YouTube. Or all of you, I'm pretty sure, have your some bank application. It can be a mobile application or a web-based application. So those applications, all of those applications go through testing process, quality assurance process before it's made available to the general public. And there's a very important reason why. And we'll talk about defects and why it's important to find the defects earlier than later tomorrow. Okay, then you'll see that how much it can actually cost to the companies if they find defects later after they made the application public. So again, it's about expectation and reality. Okay, so the question here is, imagine you're a tester. Imagine you're a tester. This is your first day at work, and some of you already answered this question, but let's see if everybody else can catch up. Your manager is asking you to create test cases for this application. So you go to the login page, and I can show you this application as well. And you see this login page there. Maybe only the login page is ready, and they're asking you to test this application. And what will be your first step, right? And how will you design your test cases? And so that's a tricky question right there. So you can put your answers to the chat box. So this is your first day, imagine, at work, and you're asked to create test cases for this particular application. What are your actions? Okay, good. Here we go. So the answers here is that what are the requirements? And also, I will need to know more about the application before I think of anything. That's right. Review the description, explore the application. So we'll talk about that as well, exploring the application. So that's an interesting concept though. And then you need to read the requirements from the business analyst, ask for the RTM. Now we're going a bit technical here with terminology for the beginners. And yeah, the purpose of the application. So basically, you guys are doing great. The purpose of this kind of tricky question is to check if you really know what to do next, right? If you know the sequence of activities in QA testing. So you need to first understand the product. First, you need to understand the product well before you jump into testing. So that's one of the mistakes that newly beginners make, that they just jump into testing the application right away, before understanding the product, before understanding the application. So have you ever heard of the elephant and the blind man? I think that's an Indian story. So we are basically like a blind man touching the elephant and then figuring out what that is, right? Whether it's a snake or whether it's a wall or whether it's a rope, if we just start testing without learning the requirements. You're exploring, but then again, for those who are currently in the job market, for those who are new to this field, you will be hearing and learning about the importance of the requirement documents and learning the product first before testing a lot. So it's going to be very much in your mind all the time. And here's another interesting real life interview question. This question specifically was asked a long time ago. And the question here was, how many test cases would you create to test this workflow or diagram, right? And if you look at this, you can see the workflow. You can see it. There are certain numbers, 1, 2, 3, and you can go and count up to 24, I think here, right? And yeah, I can see the 25 and further. So the interviewer pretty much tricking you to count the number of test cases. And my reaction as a tester to this kind of workflow would be, what is it? What am I looking at, right? What kind of product is this? What kind of application is this? What kind of workflow is this? Is there anything else? Is there some more information about this workflow, right? So counting your test cases is probably the last thing that you would probably do. So whenever you are asked a similar question in an interview, so that's how your reaction should be. So as a tester, as a good tester, you learn the product before you give any technical answer. Okay. First, you learn the product. It's logical, right? The better you know the product, the better you can test. The better you know where it can actually break. So the more time should be spent on learning the product so that you can actually test better. So how do you learn the product then, right? So we said, okay, you need to learn the product. You need to go ahead and understand the application first before you start testing. So how do you learn the product? Where do you actually get those expected conditions from? So you can learn more about the functionalities or features of the application by reading the requirement documents. And some of you, and I'm assuming already attending certain boot camps or working professionals already answered the question saying that you need to, get the acceptance criteria, you need to read the requirement documents and so on. And that's true. Just like, you would actually read the specifications of the vacuum cleaner, or if you purchased a refrigerator, you would read its document and understand what your refrigerator can do, right? Before you use it. So just like that, same concept, same approach works for the applications as well. And technically, this is why, testing is one of the IT careers where non-technical people, prefer to jump in, right? Because you really don't need much of a technical knowledge to be able to test, to be able to just to study the requirements and then convert them into test cases. We'll talk about test cases in a minute. So types of requirement documents. At first glance, it's too much information for the beginners, but let's just go through them quickly. So business requirement document, functional requirement document. So there's different types of documents there. Now, where the information about the application will be described, right? So they're basically sometimes repeat each other. Some of them are more general, some of them are more specific. There's also an interesting document called data mapping document. And if you will be going for ETL, SQL and ETL specialization, and this is going to be pretty much your go-to document, right? It's a data mapping document. And there's also roles and permissions security matrix. Pretty much all big companies that you could imagine, they have hundreds of applications, and all of the applications, they have roles. So in one application, you can be a manager, or you can be a viewer, you can be an editor, you can be an approver, and so on. And all those functionalities can be, all the roles and permissions are described in the roles and permissions security matrix. And of course, epics and user stories. Those are, your requirements basically, but in, specifically in Agile and Agile Scrum, SDLC. We'll talk about waterfall and Agile tomorrow briefly. All right. So now is the time to look at the real functional requirement document and then see how we can actually convert that into a test case. So we'll see what the test case is, and I'll show you the actual functional requirement document. So right here, we're looking at a functional requirement document here. As you can see, it says functional requirement document. It has the project name and the project ID version and the time it was published. You have the version history, and then if you're a part of the bootcamp, you will be given access to this document as you will be working on converting the requirements into test cases. As you can see, so we'll just go ahead and choose one of the simple requirements just for the sake of explanation. All right. So functional requirement number one, that is login. Any application, any web-based application, pretty much, they have this login or authentication process. And as a tester, you will be testing the login process a lot. So let's read the functional requirement document pretty much. So FR1, that just stands for functional requirement number one. And the name of the requirement is just simplified, login. And we can read when the user navigates the URL, this particular URL, or this web address, login screen will display. Okay. And then the login screen will contain the following elements. So there will be username, there will be password, login, right? This is the requirement document that you guys were requesting earlier, basically, right? So, and as you can see, when, there are more specifics. So when you enter the password, entered value should be hidden or masked. So when you enter the password, your password shouldn't be displayed. And when you click the login button, if the user enters the correct username and password combination, then it navigates the product screen. But if you enter incorrect username and password, then the error message should display. And that's what we talk, we refer to as a positive and negative test cases, right? So let's create our first test case. And this is essentially the most important task that the QA testers will be performing, or you as a tester of software applications, you will be performing that, reading the requirements and converting them into test cases. Okay, reading the requirements and converting them into test cases. So let me bring in this particular tool right here on this screen. Okay, so this tool right here, it is called as Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps, and it's currently one of the widely used test management tools. There are other alternatives such as Zephyr Scale, and there's also application lifecycle management, or previously called as a quality center, QC. The idea or concept in all of those tools are pretty much the same. So this is where you can create, store your test cases, you can run them, and you can have the result of those test cases, and you can create reports and so on, right? So as part of our bootcamp, we'll see the list of tools that you will be covering. So you will be learning the Azure DevOps. You will have access. Apart from that, you will be, you will have access to Jira and the Zephyr Scale as well. So you will create test cases both in Azure DevOps and in Zephyr Scales. So let's go ahead and create our first test case. As you can see, it's very intuitive, right? So you have this button right here. So we're just going to skip the left-hand side, menus for now, because we're focusing on creation of the test case. So we're going to click on the new test case button right there. And it opens this particular screen. And as you can see, the first thing it's asking you is to enter the title. So every test case needs to have a name, right? And there are different naming conventions for test cases, and you want to keep it as simple as possible. So log in with valid credentials. Now, there's a approach, among certain test users, they can use verify in front of it, or test, or check, but it's really a standardization, right? When you join a new company, you always ask or go through the test cases that they have just to fit in, all right? And then they will also provide a walkthrough of 1 or 2 weeks for you how to name the test cases, how they name their test cases. But the way that we suggest in our company, for example, we keep it very simple. We try to avoid the unnecessary words like verify, check in. So just log in with valid credentials. So just action plus object, right? Now we're going to go ahead and create our test steps, right? So test case consists of test steps. So what's the first step? The first step here would be you need to navigate to a particular page, right? So if we go back to this requirement here, you need to navigate to this particular page here. So we're going to type in navigate to this particular page. So what's our expected result? We talked about expected conditions, right? The expected result is the login screen will display. You're pretty much copying and pasting from the requirement documents. Now, the next step is enter username, but let's say valid or correct username, right? Enter correct username. And do we have any expected result? Well, pretty much no expected result, as long as it allows you to enter, right? Allows to enter. Let's go to the next step. Enter correct password. What's the expected result that we have? Let's read our functional requirement document. That's what testers are doing on a daily basis. They are reading the requirements and they're converting them into test cases. Now, there are, of course, different ways, different types of testing, and then we'll talk about this when we have the lesson 3 SQL, and then during test automation as well. But for now, what we're performing is manual testing, right? We're creating a test case. So we entered our expected result that the entered values should be hidden or masked. And then the last step is click login. So when you click login screen will navigate to product screen. Okay, here we go. That's our expected result. Okay, so we can be more specific and say click login button. So that's pretty much it. So we just create our first test case. You can just save and close. So what's the next step? The next step after you create your test case is to execute it, right? Now, of course, in the real business scenario, there are several steps that happens after you create your test case. You have to prepare the environment, the application has to be up and running and so on. There's a deployment process and so on. But for now, we're just gonna keep it simple and then try to execute our test case. Basically run your test case, right? So we'll go ahead and click run for a web application. And as you can see on the left-hand side, I have this screen that just opened with the steps that I had, in the left-hand side. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to copy this, and then we will try to execute the steps as we can. So we'll just put them side by side, and now let's execute those steps right here. Right. So we navigated to this particular URL, and what is our expected result? That the login screen will display. Okay, great, pass. So you have these two icons here. You see that pass or fail. So we're going to go ahead and pass the step. The next, enter correct username. Correct username is the standard user right here, and it allows me to enter correct password. I'm going to get the correct password right here. What is our expected result? Our expected behavior here is that as you enter the password should be hidden or masked, such as with the asterisk signs, right? So in the last step, so let's pass the first, second, and third steps, and then the last step is click the login button. We click the login button, and we basically navigated to the product screen. So our test case passed. Perfect, right? Our test case passed. So you can pretty much pass the whole test case here, and then save and close, and we can go back to our Azure DevOps right here. As you can see, our test case has passed. All right. So now, all right. So I see some questions here. I'll just cover them as soon as possible. Let me just go through the testing process. So now, going back to this application, if I log out, now I want to hear from the audience, how else would you actually test this login process? Now I can show you the requirement document again. As you can see, it says, if user enters incorrect username and password combination, system will display an error message. Okay, so this is the requirement that you have for the negative test case, right? For negative, pretty much a failure scenario. So how would you test it? So let's see, what kind of ideas you have. All right, so I'm getting, with the wrong password, okay, and include forgot password. That's a good one. Yep. And there's invalid password. Yes. You got to be a bit more specific about invalid password. So what do you mean invalid password? Incorrect password, and a wrong username, blank fields, and also you missed the password. That you mean the blank password, pretty much. Unsupported characters. Excellent. Yes, right. This is how now you're trying to think like a tester. Different language. That's a good one. Different language. That's it's close to unsupported characters as well. So if the system is supporting, let's say, Latin, and then you put some let's say Japanese signs, symbols, pretty much, and how would it react? So try without Wi-Fi, with cellular, different browsers. Awesome. Yep. So there's many different ways of testing, right? And this is where your experience, your creative thinking, and then ability to carefully and read the requirement document comes into picture. Okay, so this is where you have to act professionally, basically, so that you don't, you catch any issues, any potential issues with the application. So, I want to quickly show you, how to create negative test cases here as well, because there's a very interesting concept of creating parameterized test case in Azure DevOps, right? So we'll go ahead and create a new test case, and then we'll name it as login with invalid credentials. You see, so I'm not creating 10 different test cases for all the suggestions that you just gave, right? Because that wouldn't be efficient. So as a tester, as an IT professional, in general, you always have to try to be as efficient as possible, right? And that efficiency mostly comes with an automation as well. But even when you're doing a manual testing, you have to try to be as efficient as possible. So we're going to navigate to this website again. Okay, so login screen will display, but this time we'll say enter. We'll just put this username, but before the username, I'm going to use this at the rate sign, right? So I'll say username with this particular sign. And what it does is that it creates a parameter. It creates a parameter so that I can use different scenarios, different, negative scenarios that you pretty much suggested. And then we'll enter password. And here, of course, password should be masked. And then click log in. And the expected result is that we should get some sort of error message, right? Error message should be displayed. Now, this is the extent of our requirement document, though, right? Remember, the requirement didn't specify what kind of error message we would receive in which situation. So we would have to go with the the extent of the documentation. Documentation says error message should display. So as long as some error message is there, as long as it doesn't have any typos, so we're good. Now, as soon as I do this, as you can see at the bottom, it automatically generates username and password fields for me. Right, this is corresponding to this username and password that we created on top, and then we're gonna put in some invalid username and password. For example, I would say test, right? If you hit tab, and then it's gonna go to the next one, and some special characters and a blank, and then leave this one blank here, and then what was the valid password? And then put a valid password, and so on. So as many parameters or combinations of invalid login and password options you can include in your test case, and then we're going to save and close. So the difference here is that when you're executing this type of test case, when you run, one thing to pay attention is the iterations. You see that now we have 3 different iterations here. We have 3 different iterations. So if we want to test, this application, let's just put it side by side again. So the first iteration, we're logged in, and then for the username, we're just going to put test. Password, we're going to put test. And then for the login, I click login and it says username and password do not match. And that's the error message, pass, and we'll go to the next iteration. Next iteration again, we're on the same, but we're just going to put in some special characters. And we're going to leave the password as blank and then click password is required. See that? That passed. The next. So you just keep going through the iteration. So this is an efficient way of handling several test cases in one test case, basically. And we're leaving the username blank this time, and then entering the correct password and hit login. And as you can see, username is required. So you get this error message, and I don't see any typos here. So I think our test case is pretty much passed in this case. All right. So this was a quick example of how testers on a daily basis create test cases, how they convert the functional requirement document or the user stories or pretty much any source of requirement into test cases, right? Just like you would be testing any other simple household product, you are learning about the product using the specifications or the documents or any piece of paper that tells you how the product works, and then you're converting them into steps. Pretty much, very, very logical, common sense, if you think of it that way, right? So manual testing, if you ask me, it is common sense. So the next important concept here is, what are you looking for when you're reviewing the requirements? For those who are currently out in the market or studying in the boot camps or looking for jobs or going through the interviews, this is important. You can always mention, they don't have to ask you this question, but you can use any opportunity to talk about how you analyze the requirements, how you go through the documentation. Say that you are looking for testability. And there's another term for this that is static testing, right? That's actually ISTQB terminology. If you ever, will be taking an exam for ISTQB certification, there's a concept called static testing. So during static testing, you are given all the documentation that describes this particular software. And what you're doing is that you are going through the documentation. The application is not ready. Maybe the design even is not ready, right? No coding is done, but the documentation is ready, pretty much. So, and then this is when you are going through the documents and looking for testability of the requirements. What is testability? Check, right? Testability is that making sure that these requirements can be converted into test cases, right? So I'll give you one example. So interface must be user-friendly, for example, right? So you're going through the documentation and it says, oh, the graphical user interface should be user-friendly. Now, this is very ambiguous, right? User-friendly cannot be tested. User-friendly can maybe be tested by one person. For that person, it's user-friendly, but for me, it's not user-friendly. Okay, so it has to be more specific than that, right? So what do you mean? There has to be specific button or the size of the text should be according to certain standards. So basically, requirements should be more specific than too general. Okay. Or another example here is that website must have quick response time. Quick. Okay, so that's how can you measure quick? So they have to be more specific than that. So login page should display or should load in less than 3 seconds, that I understand. That's something that can be tested. But just to say that it's quick response time, no. And also inconsistency or gaps in documentation. Remember, the documents also are not generated by robots. This is documents, and any document that you will be handed are generated by whom? By the business analyst, sometimes by the end user, sometimes developers contribute. People come and go. Some are motivated, some are not motivated, and then what you have at the end of the day is that you have some documents in your hand as a tester, which is not necessarily complete. Not necessarily complete. So there might be certain requirements which are completely missing. You might have the wrong version of the document. So it's when you have to do your due diligence and then make sure you have the correct version of the document, and then be more communicative, more proactive, basically. Now, what if requirements don't exist? Now, if you have been out there in the job market looking for an opportunity, if you've been interviewed, from my personal experience or from the graduates that I have been mentoring, 8 out of 10 interviews, this question is asked. 8 out of 10 interviews, this question comes up: how do you handle a project when there's no requirement documents? And I always like to ask this question from the students. So why is this question asked often? Why do you think this question is asked? Right? I mean, if you have any ideas, you can put it in the chat box. Now, why do you think interviewers actually ask this question? Right? Right. So the answer is, right, to see how you think. Yes. Obviously, they want to see how you work, right? How professional you are, how you handle this kind of situation. So the answer is, the companies out there, big financial institutions, they still have applications which were created 10, 15, 20 years ago with old technology, right? And those applications, that software was created, as I said, 10, 15 years ago with the old technology. And, by now it has been updated so many times, right? So many times it has been enhanced, some certain features were added, and so on. So there's no one single document that describes the whole application. And with the technology changing rapidly, and of course, the regulations are changing, right? The laws are changing, and if it's a bank, then the Federal Reserve or the regulatory bodies will be actually, imposing specific requirements from or reporting requirements from the financial institutions, from the investment banks, from the trading, companies, hedge funds, to provide information, to accept some information, and then to give back information, right? Because the applications, remember, you need to understand, they don't work in isolation. Applications work in connection with the other applications, right? You receive data, and then you give back some data, and we'll talk about API, in the upcoming sessions as well. So now, and accordingly, now companies are trying to update. They're trying to upgrade their current old infrastructure. They're trying to upgrade their old applications with, from desktop to web-based applications, for example. That would be one example. And then you join this company, right? And then they're expecting you to handle this particular situation. So there's a legacy application, we call it as a legacy application, which has no requirement documents, and you have to come up with a way of testing it, right? So what's the best answer? So how do you handle? So what if there are no requirements? So the best answer, and this is a good tip for anyone out there looking for a job these days or going through the interviews, you have to communicate. Let me just go back. You have to communicate and communicate and communicate, basically, right? Communication is #1 skill for the QA testers. So you have to be talking to the business analyst if there's a business analyst, right? Not all the companies can afford a business analyst. Sometimes there is no business analyst. Sometimes user groups and users are actually, acting as a business analyst. They are creating the functional requirement document or, business requirement document at least. They are the main source of information. Now, so if there is no business analyst, so you're communicating with the end users. You're communicating with the SMEs. Who are SMEs? Those are subject matter experts. People who have been in the company for as long as this company exists, as long as this application exists, and they know how this application works. So pretty much you are talking to these users and you're getting feedback. You are understanding how the application works by communicating to the users, okay? By communicating to the SMEs, you will gather all the requirements, expected behavior, and then you understand the functionalities, and this is how you start creating your test cases, okay? So now, here are some good tips. What makes you a good tester? This could be a good interview question as well. What makes you a good tester? Rapid learning skills. Rapid learning skills. Why? Because you're always given a new application. You're given a new application, a new change to the application, and you have to be quickly, going through the documentation, grasping the new knowledge, and then you will get used to it actually eventually, right? At the beginning, it's a challenge to rapidly learn the new product, but eventually for you it will be like solving the crosswords or similar to that. And the willingness to continuously improve your skills. So technology is changing. If you're in IT, remember you have to be willing to continuously improve your testing skills, whether through certifications. Certifications would be the best because you have something to support your career growth, and then HR, human resources departments always pay attention to what kind of certifications you hold and how much you're working on yourself. Then also you need to have this curiosity, a willingness or test to break skills, right? To think beyond what is written in the documentation, because not everything is described in the documentation.